All right, so I'll be honest with you. I think about death a lot, okay? That's an interesting way to start a video. And I think about death for many reasons. But one of them is I often wonder what I would regret if I were to die right now. Because it's a good heuristic to figure out if the way you've been behaving for the last few years and throughout your entire life is truly aligned with the things that fulfill you, your soul, and make you feel proud of yourself and the time you've spent alive. So I often sit down and think about what do I regret so far? And what's interesting about the question is that intuitively, the first things that come to mind are the mistakes I've made or the choices that didn't turn out that well. Whether it's bad business decisions, relationships that I didn't manage properly, things I would have done differently with my health if I could go back, or just other random things in life. But on closer inspection, I realized that I don't actually regret those. Like, yeah, for sure, would it have been better if I had made different choices in some situations that didn't turn out that well for me? Yes, for sure. But I don't regret it because what I did in those situations is what I thought was best at that time with all the information that I had available. And that's when I realized something, that regret is not so much about the outcomes, but about your inputs. Because there are two kinds of regret that you can have. The first type of regret are the things you did do, but you knew it was not the right thing to do. And then the second kind of regret are the things you didn't do, but you knew you should have done it. Because regret happens when there is a dissonance between these two things. To make it even easier to understand visually, I can add these things right here. So when these two things don't match, that's when you actually regret something. Because if what happened is that you did do something and you knew or you thought back then that that was the best option, then you're not gonna have any regrets. Or if you didn't do anything, but you didn't know that you should have done it, then same thing, like how could you regret it? You didn't have the information back then. So it's all about the mismatch between the things that you do and the things that you know, or that your intuition tells you, because intuition plays a big role in all this. And there is this quote in the movie Scent of a Woman that the character that Al Pacino is playing says in the movie. And he says, I always knew what the right choice was, but I never took it because it was too hard. And I remember watching that movie as a teenager, and that part, that quote, it just hit me like a truck. And it really stuck with me to this day. It's something that I actually think about very often. So then I started to think and wonder, what are the things that I have neglected, even though deep down I knew that I should have done these or that. And I have come up with two of them. The first one might seem silly for some of you, or for the ones that know me and you've already seen some of my other videos, it might actually shock you. But a big regret that I have, and I honestly mean this, is not having read more. Even though I'm fairly well read, I have that popular list of my top 100 favorite recommended books. Very often I talk about books in this channel. I'm constantly making references. Even with the people that I talk with in person, I talk about books constantly. People often just come to me for book recommendations. But even then, with all of that stuff, I still feel I've read so little compared to all the things that I could have read. And it's something that almost every single day I've thought about. I should read more, I should read this book, I should read that book. Yet a lot of times when I was a teenager or in my early 20s, time that I could have spent reading and learning things, I just wasted it on social media and things like that. And I just think reading is such a magical thing that we take for granted. It wasn't that long ago in terms of historical periods in which a lot of people didn't know how to read. And in fact, for some people, learning how to read in some periods in history was a big goal in their life, because they knew that once they learned how to read, an entire universe would unfold in front of them, and they would have access to all these infinite sources of information, and then infinite doors of opportunities would open before them. And every time that I sit down to read and I get into this flow state in which I am fully absorbed by a book and just taking it all in, I am completely fascinated and amazed at how cool this is. And most of the problems that people have, the answers are already out there, and you could be reading books on it. You could be reading books like biographies on the greatest people that have ever lived and be inspired by their stories, learn through all of the experiences that they've gone through. You could be reading books on the greatest philosophers to find interesting perspectives on life that help you navigate yours. Books that help you manage yourself and help you question things about how you're living. Books about psychology so that you can understand other people, build better relationships. Books on marketing that can help you with your business. Books on health, books on history, or books on religious or spiritual topics. Like, there's literally books on everything. Really good books. Now, the problem is that I would say there are three reasons why people don't read books. Like, there are three obstacles that prevent people from having a good relationship with reading. The first one is how you grew up, because probably by the way you grew up, they made you think that reading books is a chore. Because in the same way that when you were in school, sometimes if you didn't behave properly, they would give you example, extra homework as punishment, and you have this association between homework and something being bad, well, you also have this association between homework and reading. So by pure logic, some people make the connection of reading bad, boring, dull, takes a lot of effort, it's something that I'm forced to do, that I don't want to do, that there's no benefit behind it. Even if you might be conscious about the benefit of reading books, you might have that subconscious connection that just manifests through how you feel about the act of reading. Then the second problem are what books you think you should read. There's a lot of mixed signals online about what is important and what is not important. A lot of people signaling you how cool or intelligent and smart they are because they read this thing and not that thing. And they're constantly telling you like, no, this is the best book, or if you want to achieve this, you have to read that book. And then what this causes you is just to read things just because you think that you're supposed to read those books, not because you truly want to and because you're genuinely interested about that book. But this is a big problem, because going back to the example of talking about school, if you remember when you were in school, it was really difficult to pay attention and to remember things on topics that you were not interested in. So if you start reading books just because you're supposed to and everyone is saying that this is an amazing book, you're going to have a really tough time doing so. And this is kind of like what Naval Ravikant says. The advice that he gives and the way he says that you should go about reading is just start reading things that you're interested in, regardless of what other people might think of those books. And then eventually you'll start enjoying the activity of reading, and you will naturally transition to books that will help you on different areas in life, books that might be more practical. But if you want to just get started with novels or even comics or whatever, just do it if that is something that gets you to start reading. Or for example, something that happened to me is that I have a background on business and marketing and all of these things, as probably many of you already know. So there was a time in my life in which I was constantly forcing myself like, no, if I'm gonna read a book, it has to be a business book or a book on psychology or marketing or whatever. But then what would happen is that I would neglect books that I was actually interested in, like books on spirituality and religions, or just biographies of people that have nothing to do with what I'm doing. And what this led me to was to not wanting to read as much. So once I realized this, I was just like, okay, let's just scrap this whole thing and I'm just gonna read the things that I'm interested in, no matter how useless they might feel to me or what other people could think of what I'm reading. And then naturally, as I started to do that, I started to enjoy reading more and more, and eventually, for sure, that led me to reading business books and marketing books and all of that stuff, because now I was growing the love that I had for reading. And lastly, the third problem I would say is the approach or the techniques that people have on reading, like how they actually go about reading a book. Okay, there's a lot of misconceptions about this, again, from the education system. Like you assume like, okay, I have to read the preface, then the introduction, then the table of contents, then chapter 1, chapter 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, for sure, on some books, that is a good strategy, especially novels or very often biographies. But in some other books, it absolutely makes zero sense, especially on books that are trying to teach you something, like a specific and tangible skill. Maybe you're trying to learn copywriting. If you have a book on copywriting, you can just look through the book and be like, okay, what things am I interested in? You go through the table of contents and you're like, okay, chapter 3, that's very interesting. That applied. That's actually the thing that I'm looking for. Then also chapter 6 and chapter 7. Okay, that's amazing. That I also want to know that. So then you just go and you read those. Also, you don't have to finish the books. Okay, if you start a book and you don't like it, you can just quit it, throw it away, jump to the next one. Or even if you were liking it at the beginning, right? Maybe you read chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and it was amazing. Then for some reason you get to chapter 6, 7, 8. Now you don't like it anymore. It's okay, just quit it. Because otherwise, if you're reading things that you're not interested in, you will just reinforce this association of reading bad, in the sense that you don't like it, that it's an emotion, something that you don't enjoy, and we don't want this. And then also, very importantly, like in a lot of modern books, there's a lot of fluff. Very often modern books, they just make 1 point per chapter and then just they fill the entire chapter with stories that support the point that they're trying to make. But if you already read the point and you get it and it resonates with you, then just move on to the next chapter. Now, if you find the point interesting and you want to read the story so that you can integrate it even better and you can understand it even more deeply, then yeah, for sure, go read those stories, but you don't always have to do that. Okay, so there's many ways to go about this whole thing. I have a full guide on what I call efficient reading on my school community, so we don't have to go on detail on this right now. But yeah, the first thing that I regret is not reading more. And the second thing that I regret, okay, if you remember at the beginning of the video, I told you there were 2 things before I went on this massive tangent on how to read books. The second thing that I regret, although I'm not so sure about this one, I kind of have my doubts, is wondering what if I had gone harder. Meaning, what if I had worked more? What if I had walked the extra mile? What if I had taken more action? Because I have the feeling there's a lot of untapped potential that I have. And I'm sure a lot of people feel like this as well. In fact, there's this quote that a guy I follow on Twitter posted once that I really, really like from Napoleon, that he basically said, I have never found the limit of my capacity for work, which basically means he could have gone hard. He could have done even more work. And this is a man who did so much. I don't know how much you know about Napoleon. I think most people are very unaware of all the things that this man did throughout his entire life. It is incredible. It is fascinating. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm not an expert on Napoleon and this is not a history video. And also, by the way, I'm not implying that I'm at his level, okay? Napoleon is right here and I am right here, okay? But still, I have this same feeling that he is describing. Like, what if I would have gone harder? Now, even though I think about this, I'm not fully sure I regret it, but maybe it's because I'm still kind of young. I'm still capable of doing so many things, but maybe it's something that when I'm 50, 60, 70, 80, then it will start to hit me, right? So maybe right now the feeling that I have is just like this subtle hint that I might have this future regret, even though I've already achieved a lot of things and I've done a lot of things that I'm extremely proud of. But I think to myself, like, what if I had done even more? So we'll see. We'll find out, okay? The only way to find out is time will tell. Okay, so anyways, that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. I hope that it helped you reflect a little bit on this thing that I was explaining to you, which basically was the mismatch between your actions and the things you know. And also maybe it even inspired you to pick up on reading again or to question if you're truly using most of your potential. Subscribe to the channel because I often post videos like this on topics like health, business, relationships, spirituality, and how to bring them all together so that you can build a good life that you can be proud of and fulfilled with. So go subscribe and go watch some of my other videos. But for now, that's it. And hopefully I will see you very soon. Take care. Peace.